Hello everyone, welcome to What If Luffy Was Reincarnation of Gin Ichimaru Part 2. Before we start, please go support KZ1818 for writing that awesome fanfic. Now let's begin. Chapter 7. The power I use is called Spiritual Energy or Ryoryoku. Luffy, Spirit Energy Nami. It is a power aligned with the spiritual sensitivity and willpower of the user. It is used by spiritual beings to provide power for their various abilities. Spiritual beings. Does that mean you are not human? Zoro, I am human currently. In my previous life I was a Shinigami. After getting reincarnated I still retained my Shinigami powers. Luffy, Shinigami. You were god of death. Usopp, no, Shinigami are guardians of the souls who are going through the circle of transmigration. In ancient times, they were known as balancers. They purify hollows who do evil in the world of the living and ensure the safe crossing of souls. Luffy, what are hollows? Nami, hollows are a race of creatures which are born from human souls who, for various reasons, do not cross over to soul society afterlife after their death and stay in the human world for too long. They are corrupt spirits with supernatural powers which devour the souls of both living and deceased humans. Luffy, I was part of the Gate 13. Luffy, Gate 13 Zoro, the lead organization tasked with guarding the soul society and its residents. In the Gate 13 there are 13 squads, each led by a captain. I was the captain of Squad 3 before my death. These captains, they must have been strong. Zoro, the head captain, and Captain Aizen were especially strong. Luffy, when he said Aizen's name he got angry. Nami, Zoro and Usopp saw it. So use spiritual energy to protect yourself. Zoro, yeah, I can enhance myself with it. Luffy, the Shinigami, I picked an interesting captain to follow. Zoro thought. Later, where are they? Usopp asked as dawn had come and no pirates were in sight. Nami put a hand to her ear. I hear shouting coming from the north. She said. The north? Usopp asked before his eyes widened. Wait a minute, the northern shore, he shouted. Wait. So we're at the wrong shore? Zoro asked. Well, they had their secret meeting here, so I thought they would attack from here as well, Usopp yelled. This oil trap is worthless now, so all we gotta do is get to the north shore, huh? Luffy asked before Nami screamed in panic. Our boats are there, they'll get my treasure, she screamed. Meet you there? Luffy said before he disappeared using flash step. Let's go, the three said before they blinked and ran off towards the shore. At least, Usopp did. Nami slipped in the oil, but grabbed Zoro's ankle to get herself up the slope, leaving Zoro to slide to the bottom. Sorry Zoro, she shouted as she ran off. I'm gonna get that bitch for this, Zoro said angrily. At the northern shore, the Black Cat pirates had arrived and were ready to head up the slope to attack the village. While they were going over the plan, Luffy had arrived at the top and sat on the ground, crossing his arms and legs, waiting for his friends to arrive. I wonder who will get here first. Luffy said to himself. After a while, Luffy smiled without turning his head. Looks like you're second, Usopp. Whoa. You got here pretty fast. Usopp said as he caught his breath. You vanished just like that. Luffy just smiled. Hey look, shouted one of the black cats at the shore, getting both their attention. Who are those two? They saw us, Usopp yelled, looking at them all in fear. Luffy just sat there. So? He asked. Usopp just stared before losing it completely. So? So they're here to attack the village and kill Kaya, have you forgotten everything? Usopp yelled. If we beat them, they won't get there. Right? Luffy asked. Well yeah. Usopp said before he looked back down at them and got scared again. But that's a lot of pirates down there, he screamed as he pointed at them. While they were talking, one of the pirates noticed their boats and took a look, finding a bag of treasure in it. Captain Django, there's treasure here, the pirate yelled, getting everyone's attention. It's probably worth 5, maybe 10 million bears. What? That much? Django screamed. As the black cats looked at the boat, Usopp got an idea. Yeah. That's my treasure, he shouted at them. I'll give it to you all if you leave this island for good, he said before he was looking at the sky as Luffy used his arm to knock Usopp off his feet. Huh? Was all he muttered before his head hit the ground. Usopp? Luffy said in calm voice as Usopp sat back up and rubbed the back of his head. He looked at Luffy whose eyes were opened. That treasure is Nami's. She needs it for something very important, he said. Usopp looked at him as Luffy's head slowly turned. Also, doing something like that with her treasure, he said with a serious expression, is guaranteed to get you an ass whooping. You got that right. Nami screeched as she came out of nowhere and smashed her staff against the back of Usopp's head, shoving his face into the ground. I heard every word, Usopp, what's the big idea trying to give away my treasure, you asshole, she screamed out. I am sorry. Usopp muttered as he looked up at her, now wondering who was more terrifying. Her or Kuro's men. Hey. Django called, gaining their attention. What nonsense are you spouting? We're pirates, so we'll take your treasure and attack the village. Get him. At his words, the Black Cat pirate stormed up the hill, ready to kill Luffy, Nami, and Usopp before attacking the village. Nami and Usopp freaked out while Luffy just sat there watching. Luffy? Do something, Nami yelled. Why? "You guys can take them," he said without looking at her. "Are you crazy?" she and Usopp yelled. They began to shake him by his vest and yell out reasons why they couldn't as he kept the same expression on his face. While they did that, the black cats were halfway up the hill. "Better hurry. They're getting closer," Luffy said, making them both look back at the approaching pirates. "Shit," Usopp yelled as he reached into his bag of tricks and pulled out some caltrops. Nami saw this and helped him throw them down the path, leaving them everywhere for the pirates to step on. They watched them all howl in pain before they realized that a lot were thrown behind them as well, trapping them there. Usopp turned back to them and starting shooting lead stars at them all, knocking them back one at a time. "Nami," Luffy said. "If any of them get close, you take them out and cover Usopp." "Got it. You're nuts if you think I can." "Got it," he said as he looked up at her with a serious expression, leaving no room for argument. "Fine." Nami grumbled as she pulled out her staff and stood next to Usopp, reluctantly ready to fight. As good a shot Usopp was, their numbers were too great as some managed to get close. When they did though, Nami fought them off as best she could with her staff. They were almost outnumbered until Usopp Nami duck Luffy yelled out. They looked back before freaking and ducking, letting an enraged Zoro swat the entire crew away like flies, all the way back down the hill. Everyone looked up to see an oil-covered Zoro breathing hard. He finally caught his breath before glaring down at Nami. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't cut you to pieces," he growled out at her. "Hey, it's not my fault. I tripped, you fell," she said playfully. "Bullshit, Zoro." "Hey Zoro. What took you so long?" Luffy asked, getting a death glare from his first mate. "Not now, Luffy," he growled out. "This is nuts," one of the pirates said as they were all picking themselves up from Zoro's attack. "No one said anything about monsters being in this village. What do we do, Captain Django?" While they were all asking Django what to do, Luffy and his friends were chatting at the top of the hill. "Why didn't you fight Luffy?" Nami demanded. "You could have taken them all out with no problem." "She's right," Usopp said. "All you did was sit there and do nothing." They both glared at Luffy, while Zoro remained silent as Luffy looked at them all. "Nami," Luffy said as he looked her in the eye. "You want to go to the Grand Line for certain reasons. Right?" he asked, keeping her reason for money to himself. "Why yeah," she said before Luffy looked at Usopp. "Usopp, this is your village and you want to protect it, correct?" "Of course I do," he answered back. "Well, to do that, you both need to get stronger," he said in a calm voice. "I'm strong, but that doesn't mean you need to count of me to do everything." Both of them just looked at him as his words sank in before he continued. "No matter how good you guys are at using tricks or deception, sometimes fighting is the only answer, no matter how much you try to avoid it." "He's right," Zoro said, gaining their attention. "Whether fighting for your ambitions, your home, or for some other reason, without strength there's nothing you can do," he said as he unsheathed his white blade. "And the only way to do that is either through training or fighting others." Both just let their words sink in before they sighed and turned back to the pirates down the hill. "Hey, what's he doing down there?" Usopp asked, noticing Django swinging a ring back and forth in front of everyone else. "It's hypnosis," Nami said. "He's trying to hypnotize them all." "1-2 Django said. A moment later, all the pirates gave out a loud battle cry, ignoring their wounds from earlier, as one smashed the side of the cliff with his bare hands. What the fuck?" Zoro yelled. "He smashed the side of the cliff," Nami gasped. "And now all of them are that strong," Usopp muttered in horror. Maybe I'll help this once," Luffy said as Django ordered them all to attack again. As they charged up the hill, Luffy stood up, his eyes opened as a grin appeared on his face. Zoro was getting his other swords out, but stopped when Luffy held up his hand. "I got this, Zoro," he said as the pirates were nearly upon them. They were a few feet away before Luffy looked up at them all. And then, before anyone knew what had happened, Luffy had released his pressure on the pirates. Their knees gave out, they stumbled and fell unconscious. Luffy just smirked while the others felt their breath catch in their throats as they stared at Luffy wide-eyed. "Damn, I need to get used to Luffy using that," Zoro managed to say while sweating. "What was that?" Usopp. "That was my spiritual pressure, Luffy." "Spiritual pressure?" they all asked. Spiritual pressure is the physical force pressure that a person's spiritual power energy creates when released. "If I used bit more it could have killed you all." Luffy. "No way," Usopp said as he, Nami, and Zoro stared at the scene before them. "That's impressive," Zoro said. Nami was stunned speechless as she glanced back and forth between Luffy and the pirates. "No way. Maybe he can help," she thought before shaking her head. "No, I almost have enough. I won't risk their lives. Besides, they're still pirates. This can't be happening." Django gasped out. "How did this happen?" he screamed. "If Captain Kuro sees this, he'll kill us all." He began to sweat before he heard two voices coming from the ship and got an idea. "Since it's come down to this, Nyamban brothers," he shouted. At his words, two figures leapt from the ship and landed right behind Django. "Sham here, Captain Django," said a skinny man with a hunch and green hair. Bucci here. What's going on, Captain? Said a fat man with a large bell around his neck. Both of them had clawed gloves and cat-like features. Those kids up there are keeping us from our job. Django said as he pointed at the four on the hill. Deal with them. What? Sham said as he shook in fear. But we're just the watchmen. No way we can take them on. Bucci said as he cowered next to Sham. Shut up and attack already, Django ordered. What's wrong with those two? Nami asked. They look ready to piss themselves. Zoro said as he walked forward a bit. So who deals with who? You can have them all to yourself, Zoro. Usopp smiled as he waved a bit. Yeah, have it, Zoro. Nami said, smiling as much as Usopp. Zoro just grunted as Sham came running towards him, waving his claws in the air. He was sounding like a scared kid trying to act tough to a bully as he got closer. Zoro just watched with a bored expression as Sham got closer. Keep your guard up, Zoro. Luffy said as he watched everything happening in front of him. Alright. Zoro said as went for his other swords, but blocked as Sham's cowardly farce faded and attacked him. Zoro, Nami and Usopp shouted as Sham jumped back away from Zoro. Zoro noticed he was missing two of his blades, which were on Sham's back. Sham took his swords and tossed them down the hill. Zoro went to attack Sham, slicing his side before running for his swords, only for Sham to jump onto his back and hold him to the ground for Bucci to jump into the air and stomp his head into the ground. Zoro managed to evade in time before using his one sword to block Sham and Bucci's relentless attack. There'll be a scratching post soon. Usopp said as he loaded his slingshot and aimed at the brothers, but was stopped by Luffy. Those two will kill you if you do that. He said. If you want to help, get Zoro his swords. I'll get them. Nami said as she made her way past the Zoro and the Nyambin brothers and ran for his swords, not noticing Django walking up the hill with his ring out. Django stepped on the blade just as Nami grabbed the blade. She looked up just in time to see the ring coming towards her, but stopped just as it pierced the fabric of her shirt on her shoulder. That was too close. Came Luffy's voice. Nami looked up to see that Luffy had grabbed Django's arm, preventing Django from hurting her. Hey, let go, you bastard, Django yelled as he tried pulling away from Luffy before he turned blue and gasped. Nami just stared before she heard Sham and Bucci gasp in horror. She, Zoro, and Usopp all looked at where they were looking, while Luffy didn't budge as he knew who was there. CC Captain Kuro, Django managed to squeak out. It's past the appointed time to attack. Kuro said in a calm voice from on top of the hill. Yet, everyone is unconscious or being held off by children. He adjusted his glasses before bellowing out, what the buck is going on? Chapter 8. Captain Kuro, Django gasped, terrified at the sight of his former captain glaring down at him. He was sweating bullets as Kuro adjusted his glasses with the palm of his hand. Well, Django? He asked in a low tone. Care to explain all this? I don't know. That silver-haired bastard did something to make them pass out, Django screamed in panic. While he was screaming, many of the pirates began to stir and awake. Some looked around, wondering why they felt so cold before they saw Kuro and felt colder. Captain Kuro, one of them screamed, getting everyone else's attention. All of them began to sweat in fear at their former captain, who glared at them all. I told you all not to call me that name. Kuro said as he eyed Luffy. To make an entire pirate crew of this size to collapse. He thought. He's not normal, that's for certain. However, he will not disrupt my plans. Oh man. He's angry. Sham said as he cowered next to Bucci. This is disgraceful. To think that the Black Cat pirates could be beaten by mere children. Have you all really gotten that weak? Kuro asked in a bored tone. Weak? Bucci screamed as he and his brother looked outraged before charging towards him. You're the one who spent 3 years as a butler while we've been sailing the seas, Sham screamed before they both cried out, we'll show you who's weak. Kuro remained motionless as they attacked, but disappeared a split second before their claws hit him. There it is. Django said, his arms still in Luffy's grasp. His steel foot technique. Everyone looked around to find Kuro except Luffy, who hadn't moved at all. He looked down to see Nami looking around as well. Nami? He said, getting hers and Django's attention. Zoro needs his swords, he said before a small smile came to his lips. And you've got some treasure to steal, right? He asked before throwing Django back away from the both of them. Nami smiled at the mention of treasure. Right. She said as she grabbed Zoro's swords and threw them towards him. Zoro turned his head slightly to see his swords flying towards him before he caught them both effortlessly as Kuro appeared behind Sham and Bucci, his cat claws spread out. He put his hands on the shoulders. It seems I have gotten a bit slower these past few years. He said in a low tone as Bucci and Sham started crying. I'm giving you all just 5 minutes to kill these pests. He said as he withdrew his claws and stepped back. If you don't, then you all die by my hand. 5 minutes. One of the black cats said as they all started to tremble. We can't do it in 5 minutes. These guys are monsters, they said. Bucci and Sham however went to attack, only to be defeated by Zoro's three-sword style. All the pirates went a little blue at seeing the Nyambin brothers beaten in one move. While all this was happening, Nami slipped away to steal their treasure. Usopp just stared at all this, but snapped out of it to point his weapon at Kuro. "Hey butler," Usopp screamed as he shook in fear and rage. "This is your last warning, leave this island, or my 8,000 men will destroy you." "One more minute and counting," Kuro said, ignoring Usopp. At his words, Django hypnotized Bucci to grow stronger, who then went after Zoro again. "You okay, Zoro?" "Luffy, I'm good," he grunted as he fought with Bucci. While they fought, the Black Cats attacked Luffy. Luffy smirked as he easily dodged and sidestepped them all. Usopp had sent a lead star towards Kuro, who used his stealth foot move to avoid it. "Time's up," he said as he flexed his claws, but grew angry at footsteps behind him. "Never is it a good idea," he said as he turned around to strike. "To sneak up on me." "Look out," Usopp screamed as he tackled Kaya to the ground before Kuro's claws got her. "Kaya, what are you doing here? You were supposed to hide." "Usopp," she said in a quiet voice. "Mary told me everything. Clahater's nothing but a pirate. You were telling the truth," and yet she trailed off as tears fell from her eyes. "Miss Kaya. This is no place for one in your condition," Kuro said in a calm voice. "You should return to the mansion where it's safe." This only seemed to infuriate Kaya, who stood between him and Usopp and offered him her fortune if he left the island for good. He told her he wanted her money, but also peace. That when she died, money and peace would be his at last. Kaya then pulled out a pistol and aimed at Kuro. Kuro removed a claw before reminding her of their time together for the past 3 years. All the times together they shared before he grabbed the pistol from her doubting hands, stating that it all made him sick. That after she died, his plan of 3 years would be complete as he dropped the pistol. "You bastard," Usopp said as he grabbed the pistol. "Kuro," he screamed as he shot at him, only to miss as Kuro vanished and reappeared, surrounding Usopp's head with his claws. "I still need to repay you for hitting me, Usopp," he said. "That hurt, you know." Before he could attack, however, the blades on the hand pointed at Usopp were snapped in the blink of an eye. "Then you're in for a bad day," Luffy said as he appeared next to Kuro with his hand where the claws snapped, shocking everyone. "What, Captain Kuro, how'd you get there?" Kuro just sneered at Luffy before he was hit in the back of the head with a rock. "The Usopp pirates are here, the 3 kids." "Why are you 3 here?" Usopp screamed. "Would you lie to us, Captain?" They screamed back before they shut up at Kuro glaring at them all, then screamed in terror. "Enough of this nonsense. Django, take of Kaya and these urchins," he said as he turned back to Luffy. "I will take care of this boy." "Yes, Captain Kuro," Django said. "Do not call me that name, Django, that name died a long time ago," he bellowed before he lunged at Luffy. He slashed at him, only to hit air. "Sorry, Kuro," Luffy said with a laugh as he appeared behind them all. "But you're too slow." "No way," one of the pirates said. "There's no way he can be faster." "But he dodged him so easily," another said before a cry of pain filled the air. Everyone turned to see that Zoro had defeated Bucci. "Django hypnotized Miss Kaya to sign the will, then kill her," Kuro shouted, getting his subordinate's attention. "Yes, Captain," he said before a lead star hit him in the forehead, knocking him off his feet. "Usopp pirates," Usopp shouted. "Take Kaya and run." "No way, we can't leave our—" "There's no time to debate this, your job is to protect Kaya," Usopp screamed. "Isn't this why we became pirates? To protect what we care about?" The kids looked at him with tears as he screamed, "Now go, that's an order." "Yes, Captain," they yelled as they ran off with Kaya into the woods. Django, who had gotten to his feet, chased after them. "Hold it," Usopp yelled before Kuro kicked him away. "It's useless, you know," Kuro said. "All of you will die here." "That's what you think," Luffy said with a smirk. "HMPH," Kuro said before he started swaying. "No, Captain Kuro, not that move," some of the pirates screamed in terror. "I told you before that Kuro is dead," he said as he glared at his crew. "Along with anyone who knows me." "Wait. You're going to kill us?" one of them said. "That has been the plan from the start. Kuro will die here and now," he said. "Out of the bag attack," he said as he vanished with purple smoke traveling down the hill. "This is all the treasure they have," Nami complained as she walked onto the bow of the ship. She then noticed all the pirates with horrified expressions on their faces. "What's going on?" She looked on as no one moved, petrified with fear. She looked up to see Luffy standing still. "Luffy. Shave," he said as he disappeared as well. Suddenly, they could hear the sounds of metal clashing against something all around them. As this happened, a few slash marks wound up on the rocks or the hillside, with only minor cuts hitting the pirates. "What the heck?" one said as a light slash hit his chest. "Captain Kuro's attack isn't killing anyone." Just then, a slash mark appeared in front of Usopp's feet, spooking him as he fell on his ass. "Hey, Usopp," Zoro called as he ran up the hill. "I don't know what's happening, but that girl is in trouble. Let's go." "Alright," he said as they both ran after Django and Kaya. "What's going on?" Nami said as some of the pirates were either freaking out or looking confused. Finally, both Luffy and Kuro appeared out of nowhere as Luffy kept Kuro's claws at bay with his blade. Kuro looked up at him in surprise and fury. To keep up the speed of my technique and deflect my attacks, he growled. Who are you, boy? Ichimaru Luffy. He said as he grinned at Kuro before they leapt away from each other. Kuro adjusted his glasses again. And why exactly are you defending this village anyway? There's a guy in that village I don't want to die. That's why. Luffy said. Time to end this. Indeed. Kuro said as he vanished again. Kuro reappeared only to get hit by Luffy's extended blade. Kuro got in his right arm. No way. He's beating the captain. Some of the pirates said before they started cheering Luffy on. Do these guys have no loyalty towards their captain? Luffy thought before chuckling. No, he thought. My perfect plan will not fail to this trash, he said as he vanished again and appeared behind Luffy, ready to strike. Luffy, watch out, Nami screamed. Luffy smiled before he appeared right behind Kuro with his sword on his chest. Budo, Luffy. The attack impaled Kuro through his back. How is this possible? I lost. Kuro said while coughing up blood. Kuro, there is always someone stronger. Luffy slashed his throat after saying that. Luffy threw Kuro to his former crew and said, now leave and never come back. And take that guy with you. Bury him or whatever, don't give a fuck either way. The pirates collected Kuro and left after Nami got off the ship. You took that guy down without a scratch. Nami said as she looked at Luffy. Why did you save those guys? I wasn't saving them, but he was moving everywhere, so he might have hurt you, Zoro and Usopp. He laughed before he looked at her shoulder. He didn't hurt you, right? Huh? She said as she looked at her shoulder. Nah. He just got my shirt. I'm fine. She said as she held up a bag of treasure and smiled. And some treasure too. That's good to hear. Luffy. I'm glad you're not hurt, Nami. Come on, let's go join the others. Right. She said as she walked up the hill in front of him. Hey, came Usopp's voice. They looked to see Zoro and Usopp running back, stating that Django was beaten and that Kaya and the kids were alright. That's good. Luffy said as Usopp stared out at the ocean. After a few days, the trio were eating at the restaurant from before. As they got up to leave, Kaya came in looking much better. Hey, miss. You're looking better. Luffy said as he finished his meal. I can't stay in bed forever. She said. Thanks to Usopp's friendship, I'm finally able to start recovering. She explained that her illness was due to the shock of losing both her parents as she went for the door. I wish to repay you all for your kindness. Please follow me. She said before she left. Wonder what she wants to give us. Zoro said. The trio followed her towards the shore, where they met another butler named Mary, who was bandaged up a bit after Kuro attacked him. They all followed until they were at the shore, where a ship was resting comfortably near it. The caravel, Nami said with a smile. This is for us. Luffy. Yes. She's yours now. Kaya said, smile. She's an older model, but I designed her myself and she sails beautifully. Mary said. Her name the Going Merry, while he explained how to control the ship to Nami. A scream was heard. They all looked to see Usopp rolling down the hill with a boulder-sized backpack on his back. Someone help me, he screamed. That looks like fun. Luffy said as he jumped next to Zoro. Fun or not, he's on a collision course with the ship. He said in a bored tone. Usopp, Kaya said in surprise as Zoro and Luffy both raised their feet, stopping Usopp from hitting the ship as his face smashed against them both. Thanks, I think. Usopp mumbled. You're welcome. Luffy said. As the trio got on their new ship, Usopp was saying his goodbyes to Kaya, saying he'd return one day with more stories. She smiled and said she'd be waiting before he turned to the trio. So long, guys. May our paths cross again. Usopp waved. Why? Luffy asked. Why? What's wrong with you? I'm heading off on a journey and I hope we meet again someday. Usopp said. Stop yapping and get on already. Zoro said, pointing at the ship. Huh? We're friends, right? So get on. Luffy said with a smile. Usopp just stared before he jumped and threw his fist into the air. I'm a real pirate captain now, he screamed. No, that's what I am, Usopp, Luffy yelled back as they all laughed. After they hauled him and his stuff on board, Usopp waved goodbye to Kaya, Mary, and the three kids who showed up to see them off. After that, they got out some booze to celebrate. To our new ship and our new crewmate, Luffy yelled. Cheers, they yelled with smiles on their faces. Chapter 9. It had been some time since they left on their new ship. Zoro was napping, Nami was looking over maps, Usopp was pretending to fight something by swinging a pole around, and Luffy was just staring at the sea. I think it is time, Luffy. For what, Usopp? Zoro, get up. Nami, get over here, Luffy. What? Zoro asked as he woke from his nap. It is time to decide what our mark. Luffy. Our mark should strike fear to our enemies. Zoro asked. Let the artist show you how it's done. Usopp said before getting some painting supplies and a flag. Rejected. Luffy and Zoro. Before we draw our mark, shouldn't we name our crew first? Nami. How about the Vipers? Luffy. Why Vipers? Zoro. Do you have a problem with that? Luffy said as his smile got a little more creepier. No problem at all, Captain Zoro. How about this? Usopp said before drawing. That's very good. Nami said. That's the one. Draw it on the sails too, Usopp. Luffy said as he pointed at the sails. Usopp did so before lying on the deck tired. Luffy looked up at the sails and smiled. Now the pirate ship going merry has everything she needs. He said before it started clouding up. After a while, Luffy was looking around until he spotted a rock off in the distance. I think should test the cannons. Let me give it a shot. Usopp said as he came over and readjusted the cannon before firing, blasting the rock to pieces. Nice shot Usopp. Luffy said with a grin. Usopp just looked on in surprise. I hit it? He asked before he gave a confident look at them all. I mean, of course I did. Impressed. That settles it. You're the sniper Usopp. Luffy said. Huh? I'm not the captain. He asked. No. I am the captain Luffy stated as they walked into the cabin and sat at the table with the others. Suddenly they heard someone screaming. Come on out, you stinkin' pirates shouted a voice. Luffy walked out the cabin to look who it was. Hey, who are you? Luffy asked, getting his attention. It doesn't matter pirate he screamed as he charged at Luffy. You'll pay for trying to kill my friend. He swung his sword at Luffy, who caught it with his fingers. What? Luffy punched him in the gut. Johnny slid down a bit before muttering. You got lucky. Nami and Usopp peeked out the window while Zoro walked outside to see what was going on. He peeked down to see Johnny lying there in pain. Johnny? Is that you? He asked in mild surprise. Who's saying my name like we're friends? Johnny shouted before he looked up and saw Zoro. Big bro Zoro. What are you doing on a pirate ship? That's my line. Zoro said before looking around. Where's Yosaku? He asked, which caused Johnny to cry as he pointed over to the railing. What happened to him? Zoro asked as Luffy brought him up to the deck. Johnny explained how he was fine one day, then started getting tired losing teeth and his old wounds opened. He said he was letting him rest at a nearby rock before some moron blew it up with a cannon. Usopp turned blue at that and bowed apologized for what he did. Why are you not apologizing? You were the one who suggested we test the cannons out, Usopp shouted at Luffy. You shot the thing, not me. I didn't even order you to do that, so the responsibility is all yours. Luffy, do you think an apology is gonna fix this? He yelled, causing Usopp to turn even bluer. He then turned to Zoro. Don't sugarcoat it bro. Will Yosaku die? Zoro had a grim look on his face, unable to answer since he didn't know. While they were talking, Nami knelt down to Yosaku before examining his face. Johnny started yelling at her, spitting on her as well, claiming that she was mocking his death. She pushed him away before telling them all it was scurvy. Usopp. There are some limes in storage. Get them. She ordered. He nodded before he ran off, then came back shortly with a lot of limes. Nami and Usopp started squeezing lime juice into his mouth. Scurvy's caused by a lack of vitamin C. Nami explained. She then explained how sailors used to succumb to scurvy often until they learned to store fruits and vegetables. He'll need some rest, but he'll be okay now. Really big sis. Johnny yelled happily, spitting on Nami more before she pushed him away. She told him not to call her that again as Usopp shoved limes into Yosaku's mouth. That's smart Nami. Luffy said. Are you a doctor as well? He asked. Every sailor should know about scurvy. It is not like I get sick anyway. You poor mortals Luffy. Perks of being a Shinigami. They thought. Yosaku woke up. He coughed up the limes and sat up. He looked dazed for a moment before he and Johnny started dancing around. I'm cured. Yosaku. He's cured. Johnny. Hooray. You don't recover that fast Nami screamed. Both stopped before they looked at them all. Allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Johnny. And I'm Yosaku. We're pirate hunters. They both said. Big bro Zoro here once traveled with us. Johnny said. Nice to meet you all. Yosaku said. Never thought we'd meet again. Zoro said. And we never thought that you'd become Johnny started. Become a pirate. Yosaku finished as he and Johnny went to shake Zoro's hand before Yosaku went pale and fell down. Partner. Johnny yelled. They helped Yosaku up to a room to rest as they all gathered in the lounge to eat. You should learn from this. Nami said as she wrote in the logbook. You have to be prepared when going out on the seas. Zoro said. Yeah. Usopp said. Without the right amount of nutrition, you'll die out here. So we need a chef. Luffy, if it's a chef you're after, I know the perfect place. The place is called the Baratie. Johnny said before he looked at Zoro. But be warned. It's close to the Grand Line and there have been some rumors about that place. Some of which include a certain Hawkeye man is around there as well. Zoro looked up with a grin as he held his sword. Johnny then pointed his finger outward. Then our next destination is clear. To the Baratie Luffy as his stomach roared with hunger. Some time had passed as they sailed towards the restaurant. Yosaku had woken up from his rest and was talking with the others as Luffy listened. So you guys are pirate hunters like Zoro used to be? Usopp asked. That's right. Johnny said as he pulled out some wanted posters from his jacket and placed them on the table. The higher the bounty, the better the pay. After we take out all these guys, we'll go after the bigger fish. Yosaku said as the group looked at the wanted posters. Everyone was looking at the wanted posters with different reactions. Johnny and Yosaku were confident. Usopp looked a little frightened at some of the pictures. Zoro looked at them with a bored expression. Luffy, however, didn't pay any attention to them. He was watching Nami out of the corner of his eye as she picked up one of the posters. She started trembling a bit before she walked towards the door. "Where you going, big sis?" Yosaku asked before Johnny clapped his hands over his mouth. "Just going get some fresh air," she said as she walked out of the cabin. Everyone stared at the door with a bit of confusion. "Wonder what's up with her?" Usopp asked as he looked at the others. "She took a wanted poster with her," Zoro said. "Maybe big sis is aiming for the bounty on that guy," Yosaku said. "What do you think, big bro Luffy?" he asked. He didn't get an answer though as Luffy had left the cabin as well. Nami had walked to the stern of the ship with her bangs covering her eyes. She was looking at the wanted poster she picked up earlier as her body trembled some more as she scrunched the wanted poster up. "Something wrong, Nami?" came Luffy's voice from behind her. She tensed at his voice before she put on a fake smile and looked at him, hiding the poster under her shirt. "And nothing's wrong, Luffy," she said as she laughed a bit. Luffy just looked at her with a blank stare. He knew she was lying through her teeth. "Nami?" Luffy said in a calm tone as he stared at her. Nami just gave Luffy a nervous look as she held her hands up. "Don't worry. Nothing's wrong at all. I'm Auri. I saw the wanted poster," Luffy said, stopping her in mid-sentence. She tensed up as he walked closer. "Nami, please tell me what's wrong." Nami stared at him before she looked down. She started trembling again as Luffy stood in front of her, waiting for an answer. It felt like forever before she let out a sigh and looked up at him. She had a sad look in her eyes as she slowly pulled the sleeve up on her left shoulder, revealing Arlong's mark. "Do you remember that 100 million bears I'm trying to get?" she asked in a low, calm tone. "Yes, Luffy, it's for my village," she said. She started telling him what happened to her 8 years ago. How Arlong and his crew came to her island and took over, killing anyone who didn't pay tax. She told him how her mother sacrificed herself so that she and her sister could live. Luffy noticed her eyes were welling up as she went on about how Arlong saw one of her maps and decided to force her to work for him. She was close to breaking down when she finished telling him about the deal they made. "So you need that money to pay that Arlong guy to buy your village's freedom?" he asked. "That's right," she said as a few tears fell from her eyes. She rubbed them away as she looked back at him. "After 8 long years, I've almost collected enough bears. Just one more trip and I'll have enough." "Is that so?" Luffy asked. "And what about the rest of your island?" "There's nothing I can do about that," Nami said in a sad tone. "It was just for my village. After I buy it from Arlong, he'll leave and never come back to the village. Everywhere else on the island," was all she said. She couldn't stomach the idea any further. No one should have to suffer like she did. "Why don't I help you?" Luffy asked, pulling her out of her thoughts. "What? I thought you were helping me get enough money," she said. "I meant with the rest of the island. It's clear this Arlong fishman isn't gonna stop." "Luffy, what are you saying, Luffy?" "Nami, I'm saying that after we get a chef, we go to your island and then I go kill Arlong," he said with a grin. Nami's eyes widened in horror at his idea. "What? No way he'll kill you," she screamed. She was about to say something else but stopped when Luffy put a hand on her shoulder. "You've seen how strong I am, Nami," he said with a smile. "I can beat him." Nami just stared at him. She had seen Luffy fight. But she had also seen Arlong and his goons plow through everyone who went against them when they first arrived. She backed away from Luffy a few steps before shaking her head. "It doesn't matter how strong you are," she said. "No one can beat Arlong." Luffy looked at her as she gazed at the ground with a sad look in her eyes. "What am I, chopped liver? Does she really think a fishman can beat a Shinigami? Well, I appreciate the fact that she doesn't want me to get hurt," Luffy thought. "We're here," they heard Johnny shouting. Nami wiped her eyes as she and Luffy walked towards the front of the ship. They all saw the floating restaurant Baratie as Johnny looked back at them all. "What do you think?" "It's amazing," Nami said. "That's so awesome, Usopp, I told you guys," Johnny said before they heard a bunch of noise coming off the side of the ship. They all turned to see a marine vessel sail next to them. "Marines," Johnny said before he and Yosaku hid behind the door. "You think they'll fire at us?" Usopp asked in fear. "Great." Zoro mumbled, "Just what we needed." "When did they show up?" Nami asked as someone came out onto the deck of the marine ship. He looked at the pirate ship with a bored expression. "I've never seen that flag before," he said before he held up his hand at them. "I'm Marine Lieutenant Iron Fist Fullbody." "Who is your captain?" "I am. My name's Luffy," Luffy said. "I'm Usopp." "Got it," Usopp said, which annoyed Luffy. "We got our pirate mark yesterday," Luffy continued. "And I am the one who painted it," Usopp said before Luffy looked at him. "Usopp," Luffy said as he glared at him, "I'm the captain, don't you understand?" As they talked, Fullbody spotted Johnny and Yosaku. "You too," he called. "Aren't you those bounty hunters that go after small game?" he asked before he chuckled. "Caught by no-name pirates, huh?" "What?" they screamed in outrage. They began shouting at him, which he ignored before he held his thumb down. "That bastard ignored us," Yosaku said before Usopp shouted that they were aiming a cannon at them. Everyone looked to see a cannonball fly towards them. "I got it," Luffy said as he appeared in front of the cannonball catching it. Johnny and Yosaku stared at him as their jaws hit the deck. Luffy looked at the ball before he looked back at the marine ship, then to Zoro with a smile. Zoro grinned as Luffy pulled his arm back and threw the cannonball right back at them, causing a bit of an explosion on deck. "Fire on my ship, will you?" As the Marines ran around to put the fire out, the Vipers tied their ship up and entered the restaurant. "Welcome to the Baratie, you darn crooks, name's Patty," said Patty in a happy tune. "Six in your party." "Food," Luffy screamed, getting everyone's attention. "I'll take that as a yes," Patty said as he led them to a table. "What'll you have?" "Like I said. Food," Luffy said with a laugh as the others ordered some food. Patty started walking away before Fullbody burst into the restaurant looking pissed. He glared around until he saw Luffy and his group before he stomped towards them. "You filthy, no-name pirates, in the name of the Marines, I'm arresting you for attacking my ship," he bellowed before a blonde man in a suit stood in front of him. "If you want to arrest them," Sanji said as he breathed some cigarette smoke out. "Wait until after we've fed them." "Alright. Who are you?" Fullbody asked in an annoyed voice. "Like I care if they're customers. They're pirates, they're not getting any food for WH," was all he said before receiving a kick to the jaw. "As long as they're in here, they eat," he said with a dark look on his face. "I like him. Maybe I should recruit him." Luffy thought. "What's going on here?" shouted a voice from the stairs. Everyone looked to see Chef Zeph walking down the stairs to see why everyone was yelling. "Sanji's beating up customers again," Patty yelled. "This joker here tried to prevent some customers from eating. What am I supposed to do, geezer?" Sanji said as he looked at Zeph with a bored expression. Zeph walked over before kicking Sanji in the face with his left foot. "Quit picking fights with the customers, Sanji," he said before he turned to Fullbody and kicked him towards the door. "And you, get out of my restaurant." Everyone watched as Fullbody landed like a ragdoll near the door as a Marine burst through with a scared look on his face. "Lieutenant Fullbody. That Krieg pirate has escaped." "What? How can that be? He was on the verge of starvation when we found him 3 days ago. We haven't fed him yet, so how can he still be moving?" Fullbody screamed as the other customers were muttering in fear about Don Krieg. "He escaped while we were busy with the fur," he said before a gunshot went off. The Marine fell to the ground, revealing a thin and tired Jin standing in the doorway. Everyone looked at him with expressions ranging from fear to blank as Jin stood there. Chapter 10. Jin slowly walked toward an empty table, wobbling a bit with hunger before sitting in a chair and putting his feet up onto the table. "I want food," he said in a grumpy voice. "Welcome to the Baratie, you scumbag," Patty said with mock politeness. "How would you be paying for your meal? Do you take bullets?" he asked as he pointed the gun at Patty's head, causing Patty to smash him into the table. "That's another table you've broken," Patty Zeph yelled. "We only take Barris Aswa," Patty said as he cracked his knuckles. "If you don't got money, you don't eat." Jin's stomach grumbled with hunger, making Patty smirk at him. "Hungry, eh? It's gas, asshole." Jin mumbled before demanding food. Patty lost his patience with Jin before pounding him into the ground. As this happened, Luffy looked around and he saw Sanji in the kitchen making food. Patty told the customers to enjoy their meals before throwing Jin out the back. Luffy walked out onto the ledge above Jin as he lay there mumbling something. He looked up when Sanji came out with a plate of food and a glass of water and set them down next to him. "Eat up," Sanji said as he sat down next to the railing. Jin looked at the food with hunger in his eyes before he looked away. "I don't want your charity. Take it and go," he said. Sanji just looked at him. "Forget what Patty said. If someone's hungry, then they're a customer." "Sanji, I'm not a customer," Jin said as his stomach growled. Sanji looked at the sky in deep thought. "It boggles the mind, the ocean," Sanji said. "How losing your food and water out here can mean death." He looked back at Jin before continuing. "I know what it's like to starve because of the sea more than anyone. If you want to die with dignity, fine. But if you eat and live, won't that give you a chance to fight for your honor in the future?" Jin's eyes widened a bit at those words. Luffy smiled as Jin took the plate and started scarfing down the food. "Delicious. It's delicious. It's wonderful," Jin said through his tears as he kept eating. "I'm sorry. I thought that was the end for me. I thought I was gonna die. It's too yummy." "It's good, huh?" Sanji said with a smile as Luffy laughed before he jumped down and landed on the railing next to them both. "What are you doing, kid?" "Looking for people to join my crew," Luffy said as he looked up at Sanji. "I need a cook for my pirate crew. Do you want to join, Mr. Cook?" "Huh?" he and Jin said in confusion. "You're a pirate?" Sanji asked. "Well, don't try anything stupid with this place. The owner's an ex-pirate himself." "The pirate, huh?" Luffy asked. Sanji explained that this restaurant was all the geezer needed in life and that the other chefs were like pirates. No wonder this place is so wild. Luffy said. Yeah. Not a day goes by that there isn't a fight or argument going on here. It's gotten so bad that the waiters bailed on us. Sanji continued. So, you in or what? Luffy asked. I'll pass. I can't leave this restaurant. Sanji said. Really? Why? Luffy asked. Sanji blew out some smoke before saying that it wasn't important. Luffy just stared before he smiled. I see. Sorry, but I don't accept. Don't accept? What don't you accept? Sanji asked in annoyance. Your refusal. I need a cook for my pirate ship and I pick you. Luffy. What? Sanji yelled. Didn't you hear me? I said no, you silver-haired bastard. Hate to interrupt, Jin said after eating his meal. What? They both shouted. My name's Jin, a pirate of Don Krieg's fleet. You said you're a pirate, kid? He asked. Yeah. My name's also Jin, by the way, but you can call me Luffy. What are you after? He asked. One Piece, Luffy said with a smile. I'm heading to the Grand Line soon to go after it. He looked on as Jin looked back in utter terror. You can't have been searching that long. He said. If you don't have a cook, your crew can't be that big. He's the 5th member. Luffy said as he pointed at Sanji. No, I'm not, Sanji yelled. Let me give you some advice, kid. Stay away from the Grand Line. There are plenty of other places that you can go to. Jin said. I know, but One Piece is in the Grand Line, so that's where I'm going. Luffy said. You sound like you've been there. Jin grew quiet as he stared at the ground while shaking. Once. He muttered. That place makes no sense, it was nothing but one horror after another there. Is that so? Sanji said. In the restaurant. Man, this food is great, Usopp said as he, Zoro, and Nami were eating inside the restaurant while Johnny and Yosaku ate their meals on the Going Merry so others wouldn't think they were pirates. I really hope we get a chef from here to join us. Yeah. It'd be great. Nami said in a quiet voice. Both of them looked at her as she stood up and left the table. Where are you going? Zoro asked. To get some air. She said without even looking back at them. She walked out the doors and went to the back before leaning onto the rails. She sighed as she thought about her home. She remembered how Luffy offered to beat Arlong and save her island and smiled at that. She was truly touched that someone would do something like that for her. She heard sails unfurling as she looked to the left to see Jin bowing his head at Sanji as the tiny boat he was on sailed away. Sanji screams F. Get back to work, he said before he went back into the restaurant. Shitty old geezer. Sanji mumbled. While they walked toward the door, Luffy sensed Nami and looked to his left to see her looking back at him. Oh. Hey Nami, Luffy called. Who? Sanji asked as he was about to walk into the door. He looked over to see Nami as well. Nami? She's my navigator and friend. Where'd you go? Luffy said before he looked back to see Sanji presenting a rose to Nami. It must be fate that we meet like this, miss. Sanji said. Oh hello. She said in quiet voice before she turned to Luffy. Friend of yours? He's our new cook. Luffy said with a grin as he walked towards. I'm not your cook, Sanji said before something clicked. Wait. Our? As in, she's in your crew? Yep. Luffy said. Sanji looked back at her before he closed his eyes. Fate is a cruel mistress. To be so close, yet so far. Sanji said. What is he talking about, Luffy? Nami asked. He doesn't want to leave the restaurant, but I refused his refusal. Luffy. That doesn't make any sense. Nami said. Sanji's F screamed again. Shitty, geezer. Sanji mumbled as he walked back into the restaurant. Both Nami and Luffy watched him leave before looking at each other. I don't think he'll leave, Luffy. Luffy only grinned. He will, because we're not leaving until he comes with us. It was a while after Jin left and Luffy hadn't given up. He would ask Sanji to join, and Sanji would refuse. Nami's mood brightened a bit watching Luffy annoy Sanji. Sanji was giving free meals to Nami after she charmed them out of him, which caused the other chefs to yell at him. Zeph and Sanji even got into a fight after Sanji refused to listen to Zeph, who told him to get out of his restaurant. Sanji told him that he wouldn't leave no matter what. That happened until a ship appeared on the horizon. On Krieg, somebody shouted. Everybody looked out to see a huge ship bearing Don Krieg's Jolly Roger. Everyone was terrified despite the fact that the ship looked like it went through hell. The ship pulled up next to the restaurant as everything seemed to grow quiet. Footsteps could be heard as a huge man was approaching the door. The doors opened to reveal Don Krieg being held up by Jin. Please, I need food. Krieg said before he collapsed. Jin was asking them to bring Krieg food and that he had money this time. However, most of the chefs laughed, stating that they knew about his reputation. Krieg was bowing his head, begging for food as Jin cried for him to stop. Move, Patty. Sanji said as he kicked Patty out of his way before placing some food and drink in front of Krieg, shocking the chefs. As Krieg ate, another chef named Karn told everyone what he knew about Krieg before Krieg finished his food and slammed his drink onto the floor. Sanji duck, yelled Luffy. Sanji looked confused but did anyway, leaving Krieg to swing his arm over Sanji, missing him completely before he stood up. Everyone looked back at Krieg before the customers ran out of the restaurant as Krieg looked at Luffy and Sanji. "Nice reflexes, cook," he said. "On Krieg, why did you attack him?" Jin asked in shock before Krieg hurt his shoulder and dropped him to the floor as he eyed the restaurant. "This is a nice ship. I'll take it," Krieg said with a grin. "My old ship is on the verge of sinking, so I'll be needing a new one. As for you cooks, get my men some food. I've got 100 men starving over there, so hop to it." Sanji started walking towards the kitchen, only for all the other chefs to block his path. Eddie knocked Sanji to the ground before pulling out a shellfish-looking cannon and shot at Krieg, asking if he wanted dessert. The smoke cleared, showing a pissed-off Krieg before he stated that the dessert was terrible. He then pulled out a bunch of weapons from under his woot steel armor and fired on the cooks. After he was finished, he began to rant about how his weapons and manpower made him the strongest. "The strongest, huh?" Luffy asked as he was shoving his face with food that the customers left in their panic. Everyone looked at him as some sweat dropped. "How can you eat when Don Krieg is threatening to kill everyone here?" one of the cooks shouted. Luffy just looked at them all. "Simple," Luffy said before swallowing. "It's because I'm not scared of Krieg or his crew." Everyone froze as stiff as statues for what felt like forever. What came from almost everyone on the ship. Krieg, however, looked pissed at his statement. He was about to show Luffy why he should fear him, but was stopped when a big bag was placed in front of him by Zeph. "That's 100 meals worth of food," Zeph said. "Take it and leave." This caused the chefs to ask why Zeph gave him food. "Your red leg, Zeph," Krieg said in quiet shock as Zeph turned and walked away. The other chefs asked why he did when that would give them the strength to fight. "Maybe, but will it give them the will to fight?" he asked before he looked back at Krieg. "Well, did your will survive defeat?" Krieg just stared at him as the other chefs realized what he said. "Not even he could do it," Karn said in disbelief. "A fleet of 50 ships couldn't get through the Grand Line." Krieg's eyes widened and became bloodshot in realization that Zeph was alive. Krieg laughed before he explained what he knew about Zeph. How his kicks turned bedrock to dust or left footprints in solid steel. How he got the name Red Leg or Red Foot due to his enemy's blood coating his shoes. He then said it was a pity that Zeph couldn't fight anymore since he lost his leg. "I don't need to fight. I'm a cook. As long as I have my 2 hands, I'll be fine." "Enough talking. What is it that you want?" Zeph said. Krieg stated his desire. "Zeph's logbook." Luffy asked if Zeph sailed. Zeph refused to give it to Krieg, stating that it was the pride of the crew he sailed with and too important to give to him. Krieg didn't like this answer at all. "Then I'll take it by force," Krieg stated. He went to tell them how the Grand Line did beat him, but he wouldn't give up. That he lost due to lack of knowledge about the Grand Line. That with Zeph's logbook, he'll have the information to find the One Piece and conquer the Grand Line. "No way," Luffy said as he walked between them all and declared loudly. "The one who will be king of the pirates is me." Everyone was looking at him with mixed reactions. "Hey, back off before you make things worse, kid," Patty yelled. "Not a chance," Luffy said with a grin. "What did you say, kid?" Krieg asked, annoyed. "I'm not in the mood for your idiocy." "I don't care. I'm just telling you the truth." "Luffy, this isn't a game," Krieg said. "I know it isn't. I'm dead serious about conquering the Grand Line," Luffy said, finally causing Krieg to lose his patience. "Enough," he shouted. "I lost 50 ships and almost all 5,000 of my crew after only 7 days. That sea is a nightmare." "What? 1 week?" Patty screamed. "I'm tired of hearing you spout nonsense, boy," Krieg said. "If you want, I'll kill you on the spot." Luffy remained quiet as Krieg bared his hidden weapons again. Krieg then spotted Zoro and Usopp before laughing about how small his crew is. "I've got 2 other members," Luffy said, causing Sanji to yell that he wasn't a part of his crew. Instead of attacking, Krieg left to feed his men, stating that he would take the ship when he did and that if they valued their lives, they better leave. After he did, Jin began to apologize to Sanji, saying that he didn't think Krieg would do this. "You've got no reason to apologize, sailor," Zeph said, shocking the cooks. Every cook here did what they thought was right. The other cooks started asking why he was taking Sanji's side and how it was Sanji's fault that Krieg was after the restaurant. "You fools don't know what you're talking about," Zeph shouted. He then went on to say how they didn't know what kind of horrible pain it is to starve. "The difference between you all and Sanji is that Sanji knows." The chefs began to wonder what he meant before Zeph spoke again. "If complaining is all you'll do, then get out." All the chefs went silent for a moment before claiming that they would stay and fight. That the Baratie was the only place they had left. Jin was asking if they lost their minds, only for Sanji to reply that now that they've been fed, he had no problem killing them. While Sanji was speaking to the other cooks, Luffy turned to Jin. "What happened out there, Jin?" he asked, getting Jin's attention. "On the Grand Line." Jin just stared at the floor as he told them what he saw. On the 7th day of their voyage, they came across a single man who, one by one, sunk Krieg's entire fleet. Needless to say, everyone was freaking out at this news. Jin then explained it was only due to a freak storm did their flagship escape. His eyes sharp and murderous were like that of a hawk. Jin said. Luffy saw Zoro react to those words as Zeph said that it could only be Hawkeye. Hawkeye Mihik Zoro gasped. Mihik the guy Shanks talked about. Luffy thought. He sound like he is strong Luffy said. Is that someone you know Zoro? Zoro calmed down a bit to tell them that Hawkeye was the man he was looking for. Usopp asked if they really had to go to the Grand Line. Luffy looked back at him with a grin. Of course we're going. He said as Zoro said that he would finally fight his rival. Sanji just told them all that they're stupid and that idiots like them that wind up dead. Luffy started to walk. Hey, where are you going kid? Jin asked. To fight Krieg. What else? Luffy said. Are you crazy? Jin yelled. Have you not seen how strong Don Krieg is? I have. Luffy said. But he hasn't seen how strong I am. He then looked Jin straight in the eye. Besides, I told you before, didn't I? I'm not afraid of any Krieg pirate. Jin just stared in shock while Zeph smirked at Luffy's confidence. Everyone looked back at the Krieg ship as they heard his men roar to life with energy. They were about to attack, only for Krieg's ship to be cut in half. Everyone was freaking out as Krieg shouted out his disbelief at what was happening. Zeph ordered someone to raise the anchor before they sunk with it. While this happened, Zoro and Usopp came out to check up on the ship, only to see Yosaku and Johnny floating in the water and crying. What happened? Zoro asked. Where's the ship? I'm sorry big bro. Johnny said. Big sis Nami. She took the ship and treasure and sailed away Yosaku yelled. While Zoro and Usopp yelled out in disbelief and anger at Nami, Luffy just stared off at the ship in the distance, sensing Nami. Nami? Luffy muttered with a sigh. He knew why she did it, so he couldn't get angry at her. He turned to Johnny and asked where his and Yosaku's boat is. It's moored to the restaurant. Zoro. You and Usopp go after her. Luffy ordered. Why? Let her keep the ship. It's not worth it to keep that witch. Zoro said in annoyance. Luffy calmly stared at the far-off Mary. She has her reasons. He said in a calm voice. Zoro just looked at him like was crazy, but agreed. Fine. But what about you? Zoro asked. I'm gonna stay and fight these guys. Luffy said. I like Pops here, so I'm gonna help them out. Before they could set sail, some of the Krieg pirates were freaking out. On Krieg that man is back, he's come back to finish the job. What? He followed us? Krieg shouted. Everyone turned towards the sea to see a tiny raft with 2 candles, each burning with a nearly green flame, sailing towards them. Even Zeph looked surprised at the sight of him as everyone saw his eyes. Yellow, cold, and murderous. It's him. Zoro said in shock. He's here. Hawkeye. Chapter 11. Everyone was speechless, nay, petrified at the sight of Mihik's tiny vessel. As it came closer, one of the Krieg pirates asked what they did to him to deserve this. Just killing time. Mihik answered. Bastard yelled a pirate as he aimed his pistols and shot at Mihik. Mihik simply pulled out his black sword and, with almost no effort, deflected the bullets with the tip of his blade before resheathing it. What? I missed. How? He changed their course with the tip of his blade. Zoro said as he appeared behind the pirates. He walked forward while they eyed his 3 swords. 3 swords? You can't be. Never have I seen a sword handled so gently or with such grace. Zoro said. Mihik didn't move but turned his eyes to Zoro. Brute force isn't true strength and swordplay. Mihik said. That same sword was used to cut this ship. Zoro asked. Correct. Mihik replied. Then it's true. You're the best. Zoro said. I set out to sea for one purpose only. To meet you. He said as he untied the bandana from his arm. For what reason? Mihik asked. To defeat you. He said as he tied his bandana to his head. How foolish. Mihik said with a smirk. Zoro unsheated Wado and pointed it at Hawkeye. You're not doing anything now. Let's go. He said. By now, all the pirates knew who he was. The pirate hunter, eh? Krieg said. He's a what? Sanji asked, looking a bit surprised. You're a weak fool. Mihik said before he leapt over to the floating piece of ship that Zoro was standing on. If you're a competent swordsman, you should understand the difference between us even before you drew your blade. Why do you challenge me? Bravery or stupidity? My dream, Zoro said as he placed Wado between his teeth and drew his 2 other swords. That, and a promise I plan to fulfill. Patty began to speak about the clash between them, while Yosaku and Johnny cheered on about how Zoro was unbeatable and already the strongest. Luffy remained quiet as he knew how this would turn out. Mihik then took the tiny golden cross from his neck and unsheathed the tiny blade inside, angering Zoro. What do you plan to do with that? Zoro asked. This is more than enough. After all, you wouldn't kill a fly with a cannon, would you? Hawkeye said before apologizing that he didn't have any blade smaller than that. You're gonna regret that. Zoro said as he ran toward Hawkeye. Die. You have no idea how big the world is, Mihawk said as Zoro charged. Onigiri, he shouted as he brought his blades to strike. Luffy didn't react at all as Mihawk stopped all of Zoro's blades in mid-strike. What? Zoro said through clenched teeth. He and everyone around were stunned at the sight. Big bro Zoro's attack was stopped by Mihawk. Johnny shouted. No way, Yosaku yelled. That attack's never failed before. No way, Zoro thought. I can't move my blades, how is this possible? He thought before he screamed out, I am not that far behind the best. After that he swung his swords wildly at Hawkeye, who parried and dodged at each and every strike. Luffy watched as Johnny and Yosaku yelled out to him. You're just messing with him? Right, big bro? Yosaku asked, unable to believe what he was seeing. Big bro, Johnny called out in tears. You cannot be that much better than me, Zoro yelled as he attacked again. Such violent swordsmanship. Mihawk said as he blocked another attack. This continued on before Mihawk dodged an attack and, with the side of his hand, hit Zoro in the back of the neck, nearly rendering him unconscious. Zoro struggled to stay in the fight, even though he could barely see. He fumbled toward Mihawk in an attempt to attack, only for Mihawk to step out of the way for Zoro to fall. He lay there, gasping for breath, as Mihawk looked at him with a slightly curious gaze. What weight do you carry upon your shoulders, weakling? Weakling? Johnny and Yosaku shouted as they went for their swords, saying they'd teach him a lesson for speaking about Zoro that way. They were about to jump, but noticed a hand on their shoulders, keeping them from moving. They looked back to see it was Luffy keeping them in place. This is Zoro's fight. Luffy said as he kept a hardened stare at Zoro's fight. Stare right where you are. I refuse, Zoro said as he stood up. To be defeated, he then readied his swords again as the world around him seemed to fade. All he could hear was his heartbeat. At that moment, Luffy's words played out in his head. Greatest swordsman, huh? Got it. And it suits me just fine. King of the pirates should only have the best on his crew. Tiger, Zoro shouted before Hawkeye lunged forward, piercing Zoro's chest right above his heart. Zoro's arms fell as blood trickled out of his mouth. You've lost, yet you won't back down. Why? Mihawk asked. Oh no. Zoro said. But I will not run. If I took so much as one step back, then I'd lose everything that made me what I am right now, including my pride. Without that, I'm nothing. That is defeat. Mihawk. I refuse to admit defeat. Then you will die. I prefer death, Zoro said without hesitation. Such strong conviction. Mihawk thought before he pulled his knife from Zoro's chest and resheathed it. State your name. My name Murano is Zoro. Zoro said as he pulled his swords up to make some sort of triangle. I'll remember it. Mihawk said as he pulled out his black sword. It's been some time since someone as strong as you faced me. As a swordsman courtesy, I lend you with the world's strongest black blade. I appreciate it. Zoro said as Johnny and Yosaku begged him to stop, which he ignored. This is it. He thought. The greatest or death. He then began to spin his swords around in front of him. Three-sword style. Secret technique. Paul, Mihawk said as he dashed towards him. 3,000 worlds, Zoro said as Mihawk ran past him. Both stayed motionless for a moment until the swords in Zoro's hand shattered and a slash came across his chest as he fell to his knees. Big bro, screamed Johnny and Yosaku. I lost. Zoro thought as he took his white sword from his mouth and resheathed it. So this is the strength of the best. He turned to face Mihawk and held his arms out wide. Mihawk said in confusion. Zoro merely looked up with a smile. Wounds on the back are a swordsman's shame. Fine. Mihawk said with a smirk before he slashed at Zoro. All was calm, then blood erupted from Zoro's chest as he fell down. That was quite some fight. Luffy said as he appeared in front of Zoro. He's fast, Mihawk thought. Luffy pointed his sword at Mihawk. In an instant it extended. The sword went past his head. You are lucky I won't kill you since you are Zoro's goal. Luffy said as he opened his eyes. He could have killed me just now. Finally I have found a worthy opponent. Mihawk thought excited. Wait a moment, silver hair and a creepy smile. Are you by any chance Luffy? Mihawk. Yes, Luffy. I heard a lot about you from Shanks. Mihawk. Good things I hope. Luffy. Monster, creepy kid and prodigy, that's what he called you. Mihawk. Monster, creepy kid. That's just hurtful. I will have to remember the next time I see Shanks I will cut off his other arm. Luffy. Luffy cut off one of the Emperor of the Sea's arm. Just how powerful is he? Zoro thought while in pain. I would like to fight you someday if that is not a problem. Mihawk. Yes, sure. Luffy. It is still far too early for you to die. Mihawk said. My name is Dracula. Mihawk. You're strong, but you still have a long way to go. No matter the years, I'll hold this title as the greatest swordsman and wait for you. Hone your skills until that day, then seek me out. Murano is Zoro. Everyone stared as Zeph said that not just anyone could earn Hawkeye's regards. Luffy, can you hear me? Zoro said in a pained gasp. Yeah. I'm sorry for disappointing you. He said. I know you need nothing but the best swordsman in the world. I've let you down. Please forgive me. Until the day comes when I beat that man and take his title, Zoro continued, with Mihik smiling at the sound of a challenge. I vow to never be defeated by anyone ever again, is that okay with you? Zoro screamed as tears fell from his eyes. King of the pirates, Luffy smiled at all that. Yep. You're a very good team. Mihik said as he walked toward his boat. I hope our paths cross again one day. Hey Mihik, Krieg shouted with a cocky grin. I thought you were here for my head. Weren't you here to kill Don Krieg, ruler of the East Blue? It crossed my mind, Mihik said without looking back. But I've had enough fun for one day. I'm going home to rest. Funny. Krieg said as he cracked his neck. I haven't had enough. His men were shouting at him to reconsider, but he ignored it as he pulled out his arsenal from his armor and attacked Mihik. Die. You don't learn, do you? Mihik asked as he grabbed his sword. He took a final look at Luffy before the explosion from the attack sent a pillar of water into the air. Ist. Krieg said with a grin. Luffy was on the Baratie with all the cooks as his crew was on the small boat. Usopp, Luffy shouted. Go on ahead, I'll leave Nami to you. You got it, Usopp yelled as he waved his hands around. Zoro and I will get her back, so don't worry. Just get that cook to join us, then we can all set sail for the Grand Line. Got it, Luffy said as Usopp and company sailed off after Nami. The Krieg pirates were getting ready to attack as Zeph looked at Luffy. Not going with your friends, boy? He asked. I've got unfinished business here. Luffy said with a grin. So, you said you aim to be king of the pirates? Zeph asked. That's right. Luffy said. I've seen many pirates in my day. Zeph said with a smirk. But you're the first to state your desire with a doubt. Yeah. I heard you were once a great pirate. Did you aim for One Piece as well? I tend to not think of the past. Zeph said as he looked to the sky. I'm the owner of the Baratie now, and that's good enough for me. Luffy smiled at that before he turned to the Krieg pirates. Pirates attack, Krieg shouted. His men then charged toward the restaurant. Luffy extended his blade and slashed them, thus killing them. Attacking the ones who fed you? That's rude of you guys. Luffy said as Sanji told the chef to do something. The chef ran into the restaurant before the whole place shook. Just then, something came out of the water, freaking the pirates out. After a moment, they saw that it was the fins, a giant wooden deck, for them to fight on. We won't let you pirates take this restaurant, Sanji shouted as the other cooks cheered behind him. You won't even set foot inside. Krieg was smiling though. Actually, this is perfect. I don't want any damage to come to my new ship. Krieg said. Just then, the fish head on the restaurant separated from the rest and starting swimming towards Krieg as it shot cannon fire from its mouth. Paddy and Karn were aiming to take Krieg out with their weapon, but it proved futile. Krieg, using his strength alone, heaved and tossed the fish towards the cooks. Sanji jumped and kicked it away from the restaurant, leaving it to crash into the fins. Paddy and Karn jumped out of the wreckage before yelling at Sanji for almost killing them. The Krieg pirates jumped onto the fins and brawled with the chefs. The chefs lost due to overwhelming numbers. We're the Krieg pirates. No way we'd lose to a bunch of stupid cooks. One of them said before being knocked out by Paddy. He and Karn began to take out the pirates, but were stopped by another man who came out of the water. I am Pearl, the invisible shield, he said as another Krieg pirate tried to take Paddy's knife, enraging Sanji into kicking him away. The chef's knife is his soul. Sanji said before giving the knife back to Paddy. The pirates then rushed Sanji, who took care of them all with his kicking fighting style. Pearl mocked him for fighting like that. The chef is nothing without his hands, so I'll use my feet to deal with you. Sanji said as he raised a leg. Is that so? Pearl said with mock interest. I've fought in 61 battles and have won each without a scratch. Not one drop of my blood has been spilled. While he rambled on, Krieg attacked Luffy with a giant spiked ball. Luffy got hit but wasn't hurt and smacked into Pearl, giving him a noseblood. Blood, my blood, Pearl whispered. These guys are nuts. Pearl, calm down. It's just a nosebleed, one of the pirates said as others tried to keep Pearl calm. He's crying over a nosebleed. Sanji said in a bored tone as Luffy picked his nose. Weirdo. Danger, danger, Pearl shouted as he started banging the shields in his hands together before setting himself on fire. A wall of fire surrounded him, keeping others away as his own men were trying to put the fire out on their limbs. While that happened, Sanji had jumped over the wall of fire, spooking Pearl. What? But this fire scares everyone away, Pearl cried. If I was afraid of fire, I couldn't be a cook. Sanji said with a smirk. Pearl, calm down, you're gonna burn my new ship, Krieg yelled. Pearl shot some fire pearls towards the Baratie, but they were snuffed out when Zeph used his peg leg to kick up a gust of wind at them. He put those fire pearls out with a kick, one of the Krieg pirates yelled. Krieg pulled out his ball and chain again and flung it at Pearl and Sanji to get Pearl's flames to die down. Sanji and Pearl looked horrified but were saved when Luffy jumped up toward it and knocked it away, hitting another mast, which came down on Pearl's head, knocking him and the flames out. That was close. Luffy said as he dusted himself off. Knocking that spiked ball back, Sanji said in slight awe. How strong are you, kid? Stronger than you think. Luffy said with a smile. It vanished however when they both heard Zeph grunt and looked to see him pinned to the floor with Jin pointing a gun at his head. "Move and he dies," Jin said. Everyone saw this as the Krieg pirates cheered. "You should have just left the ship. Why won't you go?" Sanji only stared down at Zeph. "What are you doing down there, geezer?" Sanji said. He and Zeph insulted each other before Sanji looked at Jin. "Point that at me, Jin. Leave Zeph out of this." "I can't do that, Sanji," Jin said. "I'm sorry, but this is how we fight." "Precisely," Pearl said as he woke from his nap and stared at Sanji and Luffy. "Now, I think it's time for a little payback." Krieg was laughing from his destroyed galleon at the scene. "Jin, if they fight back, kill Zeph," Krieg yelled. Jin nodded but kept his eyes on Sanji and Luffy. "Please Sanji. Just let us take the ship," Jin thought. "I don't want to have to kill Zeph." Pearl was getting ready to attack Sanji, but Luffy pushed him out of the way. "You're gonna need your full strength, Sanji," Luffy thought as he stood to take Pearl's attack. "It doesn't matter which one I hit. You're both going to die," he yelled as he brought his shielded hand toward Luffy. It hit Luffy straight in the head, but to everyone's shock, Luffy stood still as the shield broke into pieces. "What?" the Krieg pirates yelled. He was hit by Pearl but didn't even flinch. "How'd that happen?" My shield," Pearl screamed with bloodshot eyes. He then glared at Luffy in anger. "You monster," he shouted as he hit Luffy with his other shield, only for it to shatter as well. Krieg was grinding his teeth while Jin just looked on in shock. "That kid's beating Pearl and not even lifting a finger," Jin thought. "Jin blow Zeph's head off right now," Krieg yelled, snapping him out of his thoughts. Jin looked down. "At dawn they gave us food when we were starving. I said kill him," Krieg bellowed. "Jin aim that gun at me," Sanji shouted. Why couldn't you just leave Sanji?" Jin asked, unable to do anything as he fought between obeying his captain and sparing the man who feed his crewmates. "It's nothing but a ship. This ship is everything to that old man," Sanji yelled. "It's all he has left. I won't let anything else be taken from him." Sanji then explained how he met Zeph. How that storm stranded them on that rock in the middle of nowhere. How Zeph gave Sanji all the food they had, which lasted about 20 days, and how they were left there for months on end, and how Zeph sacrificed his leg to save him. "If I don't risk my life, I can never repay that old man." "Enough," shouted Luffy said before he punched a hole into the ship. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.